All right, we're back at the front of the car, and this is where a lot of the action is going to take place from here on out. We're going to start with first letting off the fuel pressure off the lines, and then going on to taking the battery out, and basically the parts that we're going to be replacing. Ultimately, we need to get down to the injectors to put our Injector Dynamics in. So we're going to be starting with top mount, intake, and kind of all the stuff around in the process. And eventually, we're also going to be fitting the external wastegate up pipe and down pipe, so we'll have to get into that area. So the next couple of hours is just going to be disassembly. All right, since the fuel pump is all done, we tested it out and it works great, but it did fill all of our lines with fuel and pressure, so we're going to go ahead and depressurize it. Basically, that just entails going in, taking out the fuse for the fuel pump, starting the car up and letting it run out. Basically, we're going to be doing that because we're going to be installing the COBB Flex Fuel and FPR kit, and we just want as less amount of pressure in there as possible. So let me find the fuse real quick. Should just be in here. All right, Muchee, why don't you hop in? And if all goes to plan when you start the car, it should die shortly. Exactly as expected. The deinstall is going quicker than expected, as you can see. A lot of the stuff is coming apart really easy because this is essentially a new car. We've gotten the battery, intercooler, intake, and sort of the front fascia here out. The next steps are going to be to dig into the heat shield, the downpipe, and all of that, and of course get into the injectors as we mentioned. Looks like we've got a lot of room to play with, so it shouldn't be too hard, but right now is where it gets a little bit more technical. So we'll start with doing some of the fuel line mock-up for the Flex Fuel Kit, and then from there we'll dig into boost controller, injectors, and kind of work our way outward to the exhaust stuff. We've gotten some of the brackets off, and Muchee's working on taking this heat shield out so we can get to the downpipe and put our own downpipe and heat shield back on. One thing we noticed here on the turbo is a little bit of oil residue, as you can see. So even on a newer car, newer Subaru like this, you're still gonna get some oil coming through the intake tract and into your intercooler and basically getting burned up in your motor. One of the items that we're potentially gonna put on is our AOS, and what that does is it becomes an intermediary between the crankcase breather, the head breathers, and the inlet. That way some of that air oil mixture can get filtered out and doesn't end up on the turbo and doesn't end up basically being everywhere.
Get down to the injector area.
Yeah, so we need to get down the injectors. This bracket's right in the way, and there's a lot of stuff that's sort of covering it up. One of the bolts for it is down there. So this sensor has to come out in order for us to be able to access that. So we're about to do that if I don't lose it in the depths of the engine bay here. as you can see, we got our first 2 injectors out. There's the OEM ones, and we're going to be replacing it with these Injector Dynamics units that are a heck of a lot better, flow a lot better. They're 1050cc. What's cool about these 2 is we got the optional connection harness here, and so we don't have to do any splicing. We can just plug and play straight into the OEM harness where the other injectors were. Our injectors are in nice and snug, and we're starting to put some of the wiring and bracketry back on. One of the things that we talked about earlier, when we were disassembling everything, we noticed a decent amount of oil in the turbo inlet. That means that some amount of blow-by is getting by into the intake tract. So that's when we decided that we're gonna do an AOS on this car as well. That's exactly what this item is designed for. Essentially what it does is connect your head breathers and your crankcase breather into this, and then as the air oil mixture goes by, it gets caught in the baffling, the oil falls down the filler tube, and then the fresh air goes back into the turbo inlet. In order to hook that all up, especially on an 08 Plus STI, it gets a little bit more complicated, so it's nice when some of the stuff is already off, as some of you guys might have experienced installing an AOS in this generation. A lot of things in the way. So what we're going to be doing is, I just pulled off the head breather on the passenger side. We're going to be putting one of the hoses of the AOS in here before we button everything up. That'll just make our lives a hell of a lot easier. So as you can see, we've got everything wrapped up here on the passenger side. In terms of fueling upgrades, that's pretty much going to be it. We put our 2 injectors in. Not the worst process in the world, but there was a lot of things that we had to take off in order to get there. So the TGV sensor and this big bracket and all of that wiring had to be sort of pulled aside. Nothing too difficult, but we'd recommend maybe having another hand to help you out, and don't get frustrated because you got to really dig in there to get at those injectors. So as I mentioned before, what we did is put in part of the AOS hose. You can see that's routed to the driver's side. We're going to be moving on to that next and finishing that up along with the injectors on that side and installing our flex fuel stuff. So that side's going to be a little bit more involved. We just wanted to take care of this first, and then eventually we're going to return to do some of the exhaust upgrades, downpipe, uppipe, etc. We're here on the driver's side, and we're doing a little bit of an assessment of what we're gonna have to take off to get in for those injectors. There's a lot of stuff, including this big air pump here. Otherwise, filler neck and some of these brackets underneath here, hoses and AC lines all have to sort of come out and off to the side so we can get in there. So we're just gonna start taking stuff off one by one, and hopefully it's as painless as the passenger side. So what I need to do is get these 2 bolts into the fuel rail over here, but it's a hard line, so it's a little bit tough. It kind of malforms, so it's important not to cross thread in there, and there's not a whole lot of room to get your bolt or a socket or anything in, and then you drop it like that. So it's just a trial and error process. That's it. We're all finished up on the injectors. We just buttoned up the driver's side here. It was about the same difficulty level as the passenger side. We basically just had to move a whole bunch of stuff out of the way and then put it all back. But all in all, not too bad. We also routed the lines for the AOS here. You can see it's mocked up. And now we're going to be moving on to the flex fuel and fuel pressure regulator kit from COBB. Okay, so we don't have the proper tool for these fittings, but I've seen some people do it with zip ties. So we're gonna give it a try. The little mark should be aligned up top, and then if we put these in, theoretically this should come out. Hey! So surprisingly enough, this came right out. Now that we look inside, we see why. There's just two little tabs essentially that you need to push in, and that's what that tool does. But the zip ties do the same job, just a little bit more tricky. All right, we've got the sensor in here and the line's routed to the new FPR, so we're just gonna have to take the old line off and attach that there. The other side, what COBB would call the shorter hose, is going to the return here. So we're about halfway done. We just need to finagle some of these lines, take out the old FPR, and then clean it up a little bit, and then put in the rest of our harness for the sensor. We're done with our fueling mods. It's been about a day and a half. Installation has gone by relatively smoothly. We've put in the AEM fuel pump, we've done Injector Dynamics injectors, and then the COBB Flex Fuel and FPR kits. And everything went smoothly. It was a lot of tight spaces, a lot of things cutting your hands up. But if you have some patience and somebody helping you, then it's not too bad of an install all around. Now we're gonna be moving on to some of the fun stuff, the Grimmspeed stuff, namely exhaust. So we're gonna be starting with downpipe, external wastegate uppipe, and then we're gonna be finishing up with the intercooler, intake, 3-port, and then a few other odds and ends. We're gonna be finishing up the Grimmspeed AOS install and throwing in a couple other items while we're at it. So thank you guys for watching these first couple of episodes, and stay tuned for the rest, especially the last episode, Tune Day. Alright, I'm happy to announce the first giveaway of the series, and this one is all about apparel. You can see me wearing the Grimmspeed manufacturing shirt, and right behind me are two items that aren't released to the public yet, the Grimmspeed fleece pullover and the snapback mesh hat. So you guys can be some of the first to have this if you win, of course. Entering is super easy. Just go on our YouTube page, subscribe to that, like our video, then hop back on Instagram. We're gonna have a post set up, and all you need to do is comment #EmployeeBuild on there. Next week's video on Thursday, we're gonna be going through all the participants and picking a winner. We'll announce it right on the video, so stay tuned for the next episode.
Perfect.